Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, help for Tech by way of Fresno, Debbie McGuire's new sons, a history-making Red Raider, and flip-flops. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to see you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us once again your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Appreciate those everydayers always being out there. If you got to have a long weekend, hope it was good to you. He's the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan, and we know Chris since last time you and I gathered for a conversation. The time has been good for Joey McGuire and the Red Raider football program because we thought there might be some impending help arriving, but didn't have it come to fruition by the time we had our last episode out. But it did afterwards in the form of a guy we spent some time talking about last week in Bralyn Lux. And I think one of the final things we said about either Mr. Lux or kind of the situation there in the defensive backfield as a whole is don't overlook it, because right now it's kind of understated, maybe the shuffling that could be required. But I think the way you set it up here was that if this was a get for Texas Tech, certainly would maybe ease some of that shuffling.
Yeah, you know, they this is somebody that I think there's been a prior relationship with, so they kind of know what they're getting here. But the bottom line is, I think, and we'll get into the why it's important here in a little bit, but I think this essentially is a Kobe Minor replacement. But I mean, he could, Bralyn Lux could end up being better than Kobe Minor was. And I think that this was on the list of needs that you had as a team. And I think you can kind of start to check this list or check this need off with this addition. Again, you can't address everything. You're always going to have question at whatever spot you've got. And I think whether it's lack of experience or lack of depth or lack of star power, I mean, there's always questions at some positions on a football team. But I think having enough guys that can cover, period, I think is very important, especially the way the game is played these days when teams are running – a lot of nickel and dime stuff, like is their permanent, base defenses at times, depending on the opponent or depending on what the opposing offense is. So
right.
This, if anything, it gives you some help. It answers a question, and it also allows, like your true freshman to kind of ease into this and not get pressed into things as quickly. This is not in any way an indictment on, these true freshmen just are nowhere near ready. No, that's not. I hope nobody looks at this that way, because that's not what this is. This is just, it's really trying to check off as many boxes as you can to try to ensure that you've got your best foot forward to try to make a run.
Those guys are true freshmen. There's no slight to them, but they just are what they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Chapman Lewis, for example, he's going to play as a true freshman. He's going to play special teams. He's going to probably get some run on defense, but it eliminates maybe the need, at least early on, from having to press him into a starting position or something. But it also, it in a perfect world, it gives you kind of in some ways 3 starting corners. And I think depending on what you're trying to get done or who you're playing, if there's an injury, I mean, Bralyn Lux can absolutely start for you and you can feel really, really good about it. And I think, look, they vetted his departure from Fresno State. I think that there's a reason why they had him on campus as a visit and pursued this. I will tell you, he's got a little bit of schoolwork to do this summer to be eligible for the fall, but it's not. It should be no problem, but that's kind of why I think you see him visit, and then I think there's this lag between that and when he's able to, when he actually commits and all those things, as they tried to sort through that with his transferable credits and just all this kind of stuff, which is it's the same situation with Steve Linton. That there was a want and a need, and then they just had to sort through the academic part to make sure they can make the pieces fit and make it work and make sure everybody's on the same page, because some credits transfer to other schools, some don't. It's just, it's confusing, but that's up to academic counselors and all that stuff to sort through. But they're on the right side now, and this is a guy that can absolutely help you.
Not surprised that Texas Tech, the Harvard of the West, is turning an eye up at these bum credits from Syracuse, Fresno State. Play-Doh, advanced Play-Doh. What is this? This doesn't transfer. Chris, for Bralyn Lux, though, that's really interesting, because I was about to just, and we still can, but get further into this transition time for him as a football player, because, buddy, it's June 1 coming up real soon. And then fall camp is just a couple of months away. Kickoff September 2nd. So I'm thinking about like the acclimation as a defensive back, as a Red Raider, how tough that's going to be, Chris, in that short amount of time. And I want to get back to something you said about the ease with which maybe a defensive back or a cornerback can make a transition that others can't. But, man, now adding to that some things to do in the classroom would make for a pretty busy summer, obviously, for Bralyn Lux. And I don't know if he came to play school or not, but, buddy, we got to play it for a little while. So best of luck.
Yeah, he will be busy this summer, but again, it's minor, I think, from the standpoint of like what he needs to get done. In other words, to be on the right side. Otherwise, they wouldn't have pursued this.
Yeah.
And I think that being a cover guy is the easiest transition. This is why I think if Joey had to trot out, some of these true freshmen, it's one of the easiest things you can do straight from high school to college. That's the way Joey and Tim DeRuyter feel about that position. It doesn't mean that every guy can do it. It's just it's kind of one-on-one more often than not. I think he will have to understand scheme. I think he's very familiar with Coach DeRuyter and the system that he runs. And like I said, there's a prior relationship there.
Yeah.
And so I think they sort through that part. But where it's because the general, it gives you another guy that can cover. But I think when you play the Texases of the world or the Oregons, some of the teams that'll be a bit deeper as far as wideouts, or that run some spread and that have plenty of quality options on the outside, this really helps you in certain games. Now, is this a guy that you're playing a run-heavy team that's going to factor in heavily? No, it's not. But I think this is somebody that in certain matchups, he will play a huge role when you get into a lot of nickel and dime stuff. And, so because you talk about starters, I don't know if he will technically ever be listed as a starter, but he probably will start some games depending on what defense they start in a game based on who they're playing and what that other team's running. But that's why I think they wanted to kind of, and like this is just as big for a guy like Mo Horn, because Mo Horn kind of, moved up, in the thought process on the depth chart when Kobe Minor left. And then you have these true freshmen that were early enrollees. You had two of them here that they both were really good. But Bralyn Lux, and see, here's the other part of it. On the flip side is, say, you think about it in these terms.
But first, today's episode brought to you by Built Bar. If you want a great tasting, delicious snack, but you don't want all the sugar, you don't want all the calories, I got what you need. That is Built Bar, the world's best tasting protein bar. Summer is upon us, which means that beach body needs to be in line. If you're European, that may be the same thing as your looking good naked body also needs to be in line. Very important this time of year, and Built Bar can help you get there. It's so delicious, you're not going to believe it's good for you, but that is the truth, because there's only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait for something in the mail while you can still get those specialty flavors at built.com. You can also head over to your nearest Walmart and pick up a 4-bar box. Or if you're near Sam's Club, run in, grab a 13-bar box. You know the hit flavors: brownie batter puff, churro puff, cookies, and cream. Make it happen today. Walmart, Sam's Club, or built.com. And you can thank me later after you had your first Built Bar.
Here's the other part of it. On the flip side is, say, you think about it in these terms. You now, I think, projected would have a starting corner here in Bralyn Lux for next season, because Malik Dunlap and Rayshad Williams are both going to exhaust eligibility. So now you've got a year acclimation to hand him one of those starting jobs. But I'm telling you, I'd be willing to bet you that in some capacity, injury or scheme or whatever, Bralyn Lux ends up starting games, maybe even plural, for you this season.
Next season, meaning 2024. And that was one of my questions, 1 or 2 year guy. So 2-year guy?
He's a 2-year. He's got 2 years of eligibility, as we understand it. And I think that is very important to know. I don't think you turn him down if you know this player, you feel comfortable with this player, and he can help you if he just has the 1 year. But that's kind of an added bonus. I think
Gotcha.
If you find a fit and he's got more than 1 year, because again, you're going to be looking for, replacements for Malik and Rayshad, next year. But I think that here's easily one option for that.
And 27 games at Fresno State, 22 starts there, and certainly not comparing the level of competition necessarily, Chris, but he's been in the fire for the Bulldogs, clearly. Was being leaned on for a consistent period of time. So he'll bring a little bit more as far as, this guy's a true freshman. He only knows what he knows. He doesn't know what he doesn't know. And if no other purpose, you're bringing a guy that's seen a lot of football on the college level, though not the Big 12 level, but on the college level, Chris. And that's impossible to replicate or duplicate. I mean, that's what they're doing in the spring. That's what they're doing in fall camp, is trying to make it feel like what it's going to feel like on those Saturdays and occasional Thursday nights. So always great to have guys who have felt that many times before.
Yeah, you just can't replace experience, especially college experience, and the fact that he's not going to be, overwhelmed by anything. There's not going to be a stadium that he's in, or, a matchup that he's in where he just, again, he's been there. And I just think it's good for a variety of reasons. It's immediate help. It allows your younger kids to kind of ease into this thing a bit, and it gives you more depth defensively on special teams. And this freshman class over the weekend has moved in, and I think that there's a lot of thought internally of how much different they all look physically, like the measurable, thing that we get into. Like for example, Macho Stevenson, which is a wonderful name. He's one of your signees that, was right there, I believe, in Shreveport. And he's somebody that I think internally they're shocked that LSU didn't take him. And he's a 6'2" corner. So help is on the way. Bralyn Lux just allows you to kind of, and again, Macho is a guy that just got here, so he's going to be very similar to Bralyn Lux. But, your Chapman Lewis types that were here in the spring did really well and I think proved themselves and all that. But I think what Bralyn Lux has is, he's been in the weight room for 2 or 3 years. He's been on a college nutrition program for a couple of years. These are massive differences compared to how high school, I think high school kids, they think they're working hard, or they think they're at the top of the food chain at times if they're in a big high school in Dallas or Houston or some big city in Louisiana, whatever it may be. You get into a college program and they lift differently, they train differently, they feed you more. And all of a sudden you look up and a guy looks completely different in 60 days. I mean, Steve Linton is a prime example, and he came from Syracuse. It's like, Coach, man, they didn't really feed us like this there. And they and then that's where, again, some programs are just different. I think even shockingly, Tyler Shuck came from Oregon and was like, y'all do it differently here than what Oregon's doing. Y'all really check this nutrition box. But that's just the, if somebody like Chapman Lewis is mano-a-mano against a guy that's 6'2", 215, and he's 6'1", 180, that's 35 to 40 pounds difference
Yeah.
physicality. Yeah,
That's just math, baby. That's just math.
That's right. That's right. And so that's the part why, if your technique is right, if you're gonna be big at some point, but you're just not there yet, it allows them some time to kind of ease into their college career instead of throwing them into the fire early. But anyway, lots to like there.
Well, and you mentioned the 23 freshman class getting moved in. I saw a tweet from Coach McGuire from his house poolside, having fun with the 23 class. I was under the assumption they were moving into the dorm, but are they just renting a room at the McGuire estate? Are they all staying there? It looked like Debbie McGuire had roughly 22, 23 new sons. And I think that's actually the way that she looks at it. But yeah, there was a tweet from Coach McGuire spending some time there at the crib with the newcomers as they get acclimated to this, Chris. And yeah, it's just around the corner. Feels like a little while, but just around the corner. Fall camp time will be here. There's no question about that. And we'll go very fast for those guys who have not done it before. Will be drinking from a fire hose, so to speak, as they try to just get used to being away from home, being a college student, being out on their own, and being a Big 12 football player. Before we leave this football realm, Chris, I'm just so interested now in the timeline for Rayshad Williams this summer, because his story has made all of this a little bit more interesting on the back end of the defense. Do you have a concept of like some timeline checkpoints, I guess, where, man, we hope for him to be in this shape by then, or we hope for this visitor appointment, doctor's appointment to go well by then? Because like I said, man, we're just a little over 60 days from when you're getting back to it and trying to get ready for the season.
Yeah, I believe he had a procedure done, I think several weeks ago. I think he's expected to be, good to go in July, I think, and well before when they officially report for fall camp and things like that. I don't think that there's any concern that he would not be ready. I think it was something that he even played through latter part of the season, and at some point during the bowl game, I think it flared up, and they had to, then they were like, okay, let's let him rest and let's try to get through some spring. And if it's not fixed then or whatever, then we just need to go in and address it. And they gave him some time in spring and just finally decided, okay, this is gonna be best. Let's go in and get this fixed. And they did the sports hernia surgery and all those things. But no, I don't think there's any concern there. This is also much like this is not an indictment on your freshman. It's also not a concern of like, okay, I mean, we may not have Rayshad. I mean, I guess you're always concerned about injured guys, but it's not like, okay, we need to go find us another starting corner because Rayshad may not be healthy enough or anything like that. But and it's funny you mentioned that about Debbie a while ago, Debbie McGuire, the first lady of Texas Tech football. At some point, we need to do a full episode on her, man. She is one of the most impressive ladies I've been around. She's just like her husband with her positivity, and she does treat it like that. I mean, she is in many places as Joey is, and is just as positive and energetic, and you just feel better after you're around her. And it's like, I think that what sums her up is, I think, after the bowl game, and it was very emotional, the win, right after it's over, I was on the field, and I'm waiting to talk to Joey, and he was doing a TV deal, and I was waiting to get with him. He's just got a new contract in the day. They win this emotional big game, right? The crowd was awesome. You beat Ole Miss. And I said, hey, congratulations. And she was like, congratulations to all of us, like everybody. She didn't want any of the congratulatory. She was wanting to like say, hey, congratulations to you too, kind of thing. This is about all of us. But I mean, she's fun to be around, and she gets it for sure.
And I appreciate the congratulations. I didn't get a chance to tell her thank you for that, but I appreciate the congratulations as I took in the bold victory from San Miguel, Mexico. And by the way, Coach McGuire and Mrs. First Lady McGuire. That sounded awful like medieval times. Mrs. First Lady. Poolside Locked On Texas Tech episode. I mean, you're talking about doing an episode featuring Mrs. McGuire. How about actually featuring Mrs. We're available, any poolside treatment anytime. Once you clear all these guys out, they look like they're taking up quite a bit of space. So once you clear them out, we'll get the big handsome men, myself, and maybe a poolside Locked On Texas Tech episode just coming down the pipe.
She would be a phenomenal guest on our show. A phenomenal guest. Yes.
I just want to speak it into existence. We'll put that bug out there in somebody's ear. All right. We are back for one more coming up dead ahead on this edition of Locked On Texas Tech. And we're talking Red Raiders doing big things. In one instance, like the first time ever this thing has been done. In another instance, the Sunshine State shaking in their boots again because here come the big bad Red Raiders. Shout out to Mike Breen. It's next on Locked On Texas Tech. Glad to have you along for the ride again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network with Chris. I'm Casey. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't so far so you never miss an episode, or anywhere you get podcasts. You can also check us out on the SiriusXM app. That's SXM in the App Store. Before we are out of here, a couple more things to touch on as it relates to the Double T, Chris. First, a shout out to one Ludvig Aberg, which is a name you don't hear often in Lamb County. But if you're running around in Texas Tech golf circles or just golf circles in general right now, you may have heard this guy's name, Chris. I said a moment ago, he's doing big things and in one way doing something that's never been done before. Ludvig has become the first player to go directly from college to PGA Tour membership after a memorable recent run. I really shouldn't even use the word recent because it's all been memorable. But if you're mentioning the word 59, like at a local golf course, somebody's probably trying to fight you if that's the number you're going with when it's all said and done. But this was legit, and so is Ludvig, man, who is becoming a familiar name to golf fans all across the country right now.
You know, and he wins the golf equivalent of the Heisman, the Ben Hogan Award, and I just this isn't a topic that we talk about a ton with each other on, just like the college golf space or anything. But we may look up, depending on what it looks like here in the coming years, and say this guy was one of the best athletes to ever come through Lubbock, Texas, in his sport or her for that matter. The Sally Kipyegos of the world.
Exact name. I was about to say he's in the Sally Kipyego category of people that don't get enough shine, but crushed it.
Yeah, and so because to get your tour card, and I've heard that he's had sponsors lined up, for months now or several weeks for whenever his professional career would start. I think Greg Sands never gets enough credit because, again, it's just not a sport that's at the forefront in the college space or gets a ton of pub. But Greg Sands is just that thing is just a machine.
Yep.
And then he just cranks out, stud golfers. Mito Pereira a couple years ago too. That's now I think was on the went from PGA to the Live Tour, I think maybe. But anyway, it's like, and there are there's a lot of foreign guys, and that's why I think some people there's a bit of a disconnect because they just don't know them, or they it's not just top of mind awareness. But yeah, the guy's he's phenomenal. I can't even fathom. 59 for me is front or back nine, and then and I haven't played golf in a long time, but that's just insanity to me. That's darn near perfection.
Yes.
You are literally dominating a golf course. I don't care what the circumstances are of the course or the weather. To 59 strokes in a round of 18 holes is just insanity to me.
Yeah, I would never even conceive of that number being mentioned without then shouts of BS ringing out from the crowd. Like, you go to a scramble and somebody kicks out a number and you're thinking, I never heard of these guys. And then there's guys who are like at every scramble and you're being watched at all times. It's a very anxiety-filled situation. Shout out to Sundown Golf Course. Beautiful Muni out there, baby. Got through a couple of scrambles there.
What we need is like, Wilt Chamberlain years ago in Hershey, Pennsylvania, he scored 100 points in a game, and there's that picture where he's
right.
palming that ball and it says 100 on it. We need Ludvig Aberg with a a pose with just the 59 written on the.
I thought you were going to say like 100 plus for us as well, because my wall would be filled with pictures if we went with the 100 plus.
Yeah.
Shout out to Ludvig, who is making history. Ben Hogan Award winner, 59 on him, and then the first player to go directly from college to PGA Tour membership. And shout out to Greg Sands, who doesn't just keep it on an individual achievement level, but cranks out team NCAA tournament qualifications and the like year after year after year after year. Speaking of year after year after year, well, we can easily transition to Tim Tadlock and Texas Tech baseball, who heard their name called for NCAA postseason play, Chris, in the Sunshine State, quaking in their flip-flops. I said boots earlier, must be flip-flops actually, however, because the Gators have had some pain inflicted upon them, as this will be the destination for Texas Tech, Gainesville, Florida. And the Florida Gators and Texas Tech have danced a few times in different NCAA postseason environments, and it's come out pretty well for Tech for the most part, Chris. So hoping for similar things here, but it'll be Tech and UConn, future Big 12 matchup kicked off on Friday morning, 11 o'clock, Florida A&M with the most savage sports logo maybe in the nation. Check out Florida A&M's rattlesnake look if you haven't seen it. They'll be getting after it later that afternoon on ESPN Plus, because who cares about the Gators? Who wants to see them? No, it's Tech UConn, ESPNU, Friday morning at 11 o'clock. And we never sweated it for a minute, right, Chris? Knew they'd be qualified for the postseason all along. No worries.
Yeah, they got, I think beating Kansas 2 out of 3 in the last, regular season series, and then doing a little bit of early damage in the Big 12 tournament and making it as far as they did. I think, got their RPI to a nicer spot. They're going to have a hard time here, just because I think there's some questions on their arms. It's always the question, but you're missing Trendon Parrish, it looks like, for this weekend, who had been a primary starter for you. I think they've kind of, it sounds like Coach Tadlock is going to move up Kyle Robinson into a primary role. He's been hot lately, and I think so he's either going to get the ball in game 1 or game 2 with Mason Molina getting the other start. But it's just, it's tricky, because in these scenarios, you really need to, if you go 2-0, you're in a beautiful spot. If you lose that first game, you're in serious trouble. I mean, you just are. Not that you can't do it, but boy, you are behind the 8 ball, because you're going to get into a 4th and a 5th starter to try to get out of the weekend, and it's just, in some cases, it's just not realistic to be able to do that, especially considering that you are missing one of your key guys for this weekend in Parrish. But so, I'd be interested to see kind of what Coach Tadlock does. Do you roll the dice a little bit and go with Kyle Robinson in game 1, or do you trot Mason Molina out there in game 1, knowing that if you don't win that one, you're gonna. It's just like I said, it's just the math and the amount of innings you're going to have to pitch, not in your favor, and it's really going to stress your arms. And most teams, even the good ones, they just run out when put in that position. Not that you can't, but Florida, they're a mainstay, number 2, I think, national seed in the country. They've hosted 13 out of the last 15 years, which is unbelievable. You feel like you're rolling with Tech baseball. They've been to 7 straight regionals. I mean, I think Florida's been to 15 straight, which I think is one of the longest streaks in the country from that standpoint. And 13 of those 15 you've actually hosted if you're the Gators. So this is a national power of sorts, if you will, a national brand. So, yeah, the Red Raiders have their hands full. But as Coach Tadlock has said, hey, man, we earned this in every sense. Like, we weren't sure we were going to get here. We won enough lately to put ourselves in this position. So we've earned the right to be here, but you also earn the right, because of some of the inconsistencies and things like that, to have to be at a number 2 national seeds site. So it goes both ways. But hopefully the Red Raiders win that first one on Friday morning, and we'll see what goes from there.
You're really screwing up my shaking in their flip-flops narrative with all that Florida talk. What have we gotten? A couple of baseball go-arounds. We got an Elite 8 hoops go-around. Did we get another basketball matchup, or did I drink? It seemed like there have been like 2 or 3 times Tech and Florida have squared off in a postseason of some kind lately?
Well, basketball was in the American Airlines Center the year that you went to the Elite Eight. That was when you had a home crowd. And you beat SFA in the first game, and then the second round game was against Florida. Basically you punch your ticket to go to Boston on that night. That's when I think you had that alley-oop to Zaire Smith at the end of the game, that was a fun scene. But
made him millions of dollars.
Yes,
and just saw him doing it again somewhere on a playground over the weekend. I don't know where he was hooping, somewhere on a blacktop, but
yeah, there you go.
The kids went wild again. Probably made him some more money. Just keep pulling that one out of the bag.
Yeah,
man, looking forward to this Friday morning. Day sports is coming up at the end of the week, boys. So get your livers lubed up. We got big things happening coming up on Friday, 11 o'clock from Gainesville, Florida. Red Raiders and UConn to get it started. We'll have more on that as we get closer. That'll be at 11 a.m. Friday on ESPNU. All right, Chris, appreciate the insight and the time as always, man. Enjoyed it. Good to be back with you, and we'll do it again tomorrow.
Deal, man. Sounds good.
You got it. And be out there. Subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. We want you to be one of those everydayers. You get a patch to put on your jacket. We think, we hope.
Like a letter jacket, yeah.
We're asking, yes, not a motorcycle jacket. It's a touchy time for such things. For Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. We'll see you for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.